This video is to help you with your financial calculations for the exam questions in R067 for Enterprise and Marketing. This is a list of all the different calculations that you need to be able to do. Things like total costs, variable cost, fixed cost calculations, revenue, profit and loss, how to rearrange a formula to find one particular part, break-even calculations, and rearranging the break-even quantity to find a missing number. In this video, we're looking specifically at exam questions. If you do want to look into a little bit more detail into some of these, you can go and watch the other videos about those topics. So what we're going to do is take a look at some exam questions and hopefully pick up all of the skills and techniques that you need to do them effectively. So first of all, you need to read carefully through the question and highlight any important bits of information that stand out. So this is talking about photography being one of your hobbies. You use some money that you inherited to buy a new digital camera and set up a photography services business. Now all of this information is important, but probably not for this question, but it will be for other questions that are kind of attached to this scenario. It says you have decided to specialize in wedding photography and produced a website to promote your services. During a typical month, you forecast that you will photograph at 6 weddings. You have also forecast that your monthly costs will be, and then it tells you the monthly costs. So the first tip to do is look for the time period that we are talking about. So this one says it's in a typical month. It says that you do 6 weddings in a month. And it says that your monthly costs are shown below. So in this particular case, we don't have to do anything miraculously clever. It's just a very, very simple basic question where it's during a month and we want to know monthly costs. The part about 6 weddings for this particular question isn't even really relevant because it tells us our total variable costs here. So that is based around having 6 weddings. The fixed costs, it tells us for the month, are also there. So all we have to do is calculate the total cost for a month. So every time there is any time period mentioned, it's month, 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 month. So we don't have to do anything different. So all you have to do to get your 2 marks is you have to show you're working. I always try to break down each of the questions step by step so it makes it really clear what you're doing. And then if you do make a mistake, you're still going to get marks for what you've attempted. So I'm going to say that fixed cost plus variable cost is the same as total costs. And then I'm just going to put in the values that are given in the question. So this says that it's 3,000 plus 600. And then you just say what the answer is. And then this answer, you can move over here. Okay, so that is a basic introduction to your simple costs that you use to work this out. This question is a good example of where they put information in that could potentially throw you off on the question, or at least make you spend longer than necessary actually trying to work it out. So this says you're thinking of opening an ice cream cafe in a local tourist resort. Your market research suggests that you will sell 150 medium-sized ice creams on an average day. Fixed costs are £300 a day, selling price £3.40 and variable costs 0.80. So at some point you'll probably need to do some sort of revenue calculation, and that's why it's got the selling price in there. But for this particular question, we just need to focus on the relevant information. So it says here 150 ice creams in a day. It says the time period is a day in May. It tells us our fixed costs, tells us our variable costs per ice cream, and it wants to know the total costs for a day in May. So it's the same time period, day in May, day in May. It's 150 ice creams, £300 per day and 0.80 per ice cream. So to work out our total costs, we already did a similar calculation before. We need to work out what our fixed and variable costs are. So our total costs is fixed plus variable, but we need to know what our variable costs are first. So our fixed costs are £300 a day. It tells us right here, 300, but it's 0.80 per ice cream, and there's 150 ice creams. So we need to work out what that is first. So in the test, you will have a calculator. I'm going to use one now just to make sure that I don't make any mistakes. So 0.8 times 150 is 120. So here, just to make sure that we make it really clear exactly what is going on, and then if you did make a mistake, it would be very clear where you'd made the mistake, and you would still pick up marks for getting the rest correct. So 120 has come from 0.8 times 150, 300 is the number in the question, and the total cost is 420 because that's them added together. So it's very common in the test for you to get multiple questions based around the same scenario. In this case, you sometimes need to work out one thing before you can do the next. So this time in the question, what it's actually asking us to do is work out the profit. So we are going to highlight the word profit because that's what it's looking for. It says during a week. So this time we need to work out how much everything is per week, whereas before it was for a day. So at the top it says average day. It says 150 per day. This time we're doing for a week, and it says if you open 7 days per week. So we need to do a few little calculations here. It's asking for the profit. So in order to work out profit, we need to do a certain calculation. The calculation that you need to remember is that profit is equal to your revenue minus your total costs. So in this particular case, we can put in some of the values. First of all, we need to work out what revenue is. So we already know our total costs from before, but that was per day. This time it's for 7 days per week. So we need to get that into a week format instead. So we're going to do one step at a time. Our revenue is the price per item. So £3.40 times the number of ice creams in a day is 150. That would be our revenue per day. So we're going to do 3.4 times 150 is 510. So that's our revenue per day, and we know that our total costs per day was 420 because we worked that out before. So you can do two things now. You can either work out your profit per day and then times it by 7, or you can times these by 7 before you do it. I'm going to do this particular way because it's easier numbers to work with, they're smaller. So to work out your profit, if it's revenue minus costs, it's 510 minus 420. Now we don't really need a calculator for that because we're working with small numbers. So we now know that it's going to be £90 profit per day. This question is asking for 7 days per week. So we need to work it out per week. Is 90 times 7. So if you can't do that in your head, you can obviously use a calculator to make sure that you get it right. 90 times 7, 630. So that is our profit per week. Is £630. Okay, so it feels like a lot, Feels like a lot that you've got to work out to get that answer. But if you missed the fact that it says 7 days per week and just worked out the profit per day instead, you're still going to get a big chunk of the marks because you've worked out revenue, you've worked out total costs from before, and you've worked out the profit. So you're only really going to lose a mark or two for this particular bit at the end. Everything else you would still pick up marks for. Okay, so this question is a different scenario. It's talking about taking over the franchise of a local grocery store called Proctor Supplies, and you're drafting a business plan. You intend to sell fresh pastries in Proctor Supplies. Your selling price for each pastry will be £1.15, and you estimate that you'll sell an average of 30 each day. Proctor Supplies is closed on a Sunday. Calculate the total revenue will generate from the sales of pastries in a week. Assuming your sales estimate is correct, show your workings. So at this point now, you should be able to just think for a second and think, what would I highlight here? What are the key bits of information? So if I gave you sort of 10 seconds to think, which would be the key bits of information that you would highlight? Okay, so let's go through it. It says here that the price for each pastry will be £1.15, and you estimate that you will sell 30 each day. It says Proctor Supplies is closed on a Sunday. Calculate the total revenue for a week. These are the key bits of information to look at. Now that they're highlighted, you can almost disregard every other word in that question and just focus on these. So we need to work out total revenue. To work out revenue, we need to use calculation, where revenue is equal to selling price times number sold. Okay, so in this particular question, we need to work out the revenue. So let's just start off with what it is per day. So we're going to do the revenue per day is 1.15 because it's £1.15 for each pastry, and there's 30 sold in a day. Okay, so 34.5 is our answer. And that's per day. Now this says total revenue in a week. So normally we would times it by 7, but in this question it says that it's closed on a Sunday, which means there's only 6 days in a week, so we're going to multiply it by 6. So let's times that by 6, and it's £207. So that's our revenue per week, because it's 6 days, 30 pastries each day, and £1.15. So that's one way of doing it. Some people might have worked out 30 times 6 first to get how many pastries they've sold in a week and do it that way. But I feel that just doing it step by step like this makes it really easy to not make a mistake. By this point, you should be flying through these questions. So why don't you start to pause the video and see if you can work them out yourself. And then you can play it back and see whether you've got it right. So at this point, we are looking at £9.99 per case for a mobile phone case, and we're going to sell 25 per week. Calculate the total revenue for 4 weeks. Show your workings. So we've just done before what the formula is for revenue, so we can do the same thing again. Revenue per week equals £9.99 times 25. And we'll just type that into the calculator. So £9.99 times 25 is 24975. Okay, and the way that we've worked that out is to multiply the selling price. So I'm just going to put the formula in: selling price times number sold. So if we know what our revenue is per week, this time it's asking us for 4 weeks. So all we have to do is times it by 4. So revenue for 4 weeks equals 249.75 times 4. And the revenue equals 999. Okay, so hopefully you got that correct. You didn't miss anything out. If you did miss out the fact that it said 4 weeks, you would still have got marks for getting up to this point. Okay, now we're going to start to look at scenarios that involve a break-even formula. Now this particular question is broken down into stages. So first of all, we need to look at the profit or loss, but there's quite a lot to do on this question. So we're going to go through and highlight all the key bits of information as always. Let's use a different colour. So this time we are carrying out some research. It says 300 tablet cases per month. We're going to calculate the amount of profit or loss per month. And we're going to say whether we make a profit or loss. This time it's got fixed costs per month, selling price per unit, and variable cost per unit. So in order to work out profit or loss, we need to know what our variable costs are, and we need to know what our fixed costs are, and we need to know our total costs. So we're going to work all that out first. This says per month, per month, per month. So we're going to do everything per month in this question, which makes everything a lot easier. Again, the reason why I always put it into weeks or months or whatever at the end is you can just double check at the end of each question whether you've missed out that one little factor, and then you've just have one calculation to do at the end. So to work out profit, it is revenue minus total costs. So we need to work out what our total costs are. Total costs is fixed plus variable. So we need to work out what our variable costs are. Because the fixed is already there at 8,000, we need to work out variable. It says variable cost per unit is 10, and we're selling 300, so it's 10 times 300. So the variable are 3,000. So that means our total costs per month are 3,000 plus 8,000. So fixed costs 8,000, variable costs 3,000. That is our total. £11,000 a month. Okay. Now, next bit is we need to always double check all your calculations in case you've done something stupid. Here we go, and I just want to do 10 times 300. So everything's correct. Now we just need to do the next step, which is the profit. So our revenue is equal to the selling price, which is £30, times number sold. So the revenue is £30 times 300, which means the revenue is 30 times 300 is 9,000. So now, if we want to work out this first bit, which is that profit is revenue minus total costs. We now know what our values are to put in, so it should be a very, very easy calculation. So profit is 9,000 minus the total costs, which is 11,000. And when you do that on the calculator, you will find that we're making a loss. So the answer is minus 2,000, making a loss. Okay, that's the key bit of information, because the question says state whether you will make a profit or a loss. So we're making a loss, and the answer is minus 2,000. So now for the same scenario, we already have all of our values that we need, and this is a lot easier than you think, because it already gives you the break-even formula. So all we have to do is kind of substitute the values in. So we need to look through the question to find our fixed costs, we need to find our selling price per unit, and we need to find our variable cost per unit. And using those three values, we can put them into the formula, and it's very, very simple to work out. So first of all, let's find our fixed costs. Our fixed costs are 8,000. Our selling price is 30, and our variable cost is 10. So these are our values. These are the values that we're going to use and put them into our formula. So break even equals 8,000 divided by 30 minus 10. Now this bit is really, really important that you work out the bottom half of this formula first. So we need to work out 30 minus the 10. If you put it into the calculator without working out that first, it will divide 8,000 by 30 and then subtract 10 at the end. So that's a really common mistake that people make. Now we can use these particular values. So it's 8,000 divided by 20. 30 minus 10 is 20. And then we can put that into the calculator and we know the answer. So it's 8,000 divided by 20 is 400. And lots of people, as a common mistake, put the pound sign in. Break even is not about money, it's about the number of items. So we do not put a pound sign. It means we need to sell 400 cases to break even. Okay, so this question is a pretty straightforward one. We're just going to go through step by step again. Just like with before, if you want to check this yourself, see whether you can do it, then you want to probably pause the video now and have a go, and then we'll go through the answer. So after analysing your market research, you forecast that you will sell 1,750 hampers. Calculate the amount of profit or loss that you will make. Show your workings and state whether you'll make a profit or loss. So we've been given these three values that we need here, and we need to do it for 1,750. So this has got our fixed costs, it's got our selling price per unit, and it's got our variable cost per unit. So we need to work out a few things before we can go any further. The first thing that we need to work out is the revenue. So if you remember that profit equals profit is equal to revenue minus total costs. So we need to work out what the revenue is going to be and what our total costs are going to be. Otherwise we can't do this. So step by step we're going to go through that now. First of all, we're going to start with revenue because it's the first one in the formula. So our revenue is our selling price times by our number sold. So our revenue is equal to the selling price of 10 times 1750. That's the number sold. So our revenue is 17,500. Okay, next step, total costs. Our total costs are our fixed costs added to our variable costs. Now, we need to work out our variable costs before we go any further, because our fixed costs are already being told at the top. So to work out our variable costs, we need to multiply our cost per item times number of items. I'm going to do VC for short, is £5 per unit times 1750. So technically it's going to be half whatever this is, but we're just going to double check all our calculations as we go through. So 8,750 is our answer to the variable costs. That means we can now do our total costs formula. Is 5,000 plus 8,750, which means our total costs are 13,750. Okay, now we can do our profit. Is our revenue, which is 17,500 minus 13,750. We work that out as £4,000. Okay, so again, it's a step-by-step approach. You have to work out each of these little elements in order to do it properly. I would advise doing all of that and then just double checking any time periods that I mentioned. So this just says how many hampers. It doesn't say a week or a day or a month, so that is the answer. But always check your times at the end. Okay, so here we have a break-even question that is related to the same information that we've just been using. Every break-even question always has this formula. Remember that this means divide because it's on top of it, and there is always a minus sign in between these two, but you have to work out the bottom before you do the division. So let's have a little look at putting or substituting some of the values into this formula. So we're going to put our formula, I'm going to write it out for short. So break even, BE, break even, is FC for fixed costs divided by, I'm going to put in brackets because we have to work it out first, selling price minus variable costs. So that's just a really simplified version of the formula. And then all the way through, it's much quicker to write it out. So in this case, we've been given our fixed cost value, which is 5,000. We've been given our selling price, which is 10, and we've been given our variable cost, which is 5. So let's just put those values into the actual formula. 5,000 divided by 10 minus 5. Now if I don't put the brackets in, you will get an incorrect answer, so let's put the brackets in. And we're just going to do this on the calculator, so we're going to work out 10 minus 5 first. We can just put that in as 5. And then we're just going to work it out. Again, You could do that in your head, but what's the point in making or risking making a mistake or a silly mistake? Just double check all your calculations all the way through. Remember that a break-even point is not in pounds, it's number of units, so it's 1,000 units that we need to sell. In this case, it's food hampers, so you can put hampers if you want, or just put units. So the break-even point is 1,000. Once you sell 1,000 hampers, you've broke even. A lot of exams, one of the biggest things that you need to think is it's a mental battle. Sometimes you see a question, you think, oh, this is too hard, it's too big, it's too long, it's going to take ages, I can't do it. It's about overlooking those barriers. So in this case, the question looks, when at first glance, you're like, oh my word. But it's actually really, really simple. And it's just repeating the same thing twice. So when we read through the question, as always, it's got a little scenario telling you what to do. Now, you will have already read that scenario because you'll have had other questions about it. In this particular case, we're just going to be focusing on calculating break-even. It's got the formula, as it always does, but this time it says calculate the difference in the points for standard and for luxury. So we're going to have to do the break-even for this, and then for this. Okay, one at a time, and then once you've got the break even for both, you just have to work out the difference. So it's actually not a difficult question at all, it's just a lot to do. But if you take your time in doing it, you're likely to get it right, and it's worth a lot of marks because you're doing the same thing twice. But obviously a lot of calculations means a lot of marks. So we're just going to put our shortened version of the formula in again, and we're going to do it twice. So I'm going to have this text box, and we're going to duplicate it and put it on the other side as well, and we're going to work out both of them separately. So what we're going to do is start substituting the values in. So for the break-even point on the left, our fixed costs are 2,000. Our selling price is 50. Put it in a different order than before. And our variable cost is 25. So just make sure that you check which ones you're putting in, because the table's order has changed since the last question. So the same thing is going to be duplicated on this side, but this time we're going to swap the values. So it's 2,600 fixed costs, £75 for a luxury item, and 35 for the variable. As always, you work out the brackets first. So inside the brackets it's just 25, and then we're going to do the same thing on the other side, except swap the values. So 2,600, and this time it's divided by 40. And then we're going to use the calculator to do it to make sure that we haven't made any mistakes. So 2,000 divided by 25 is 80. And 2,600 divided by 40 is 65. Okay, now the question asks for the difference in the break-even point. So this one's 80 and this one's 65. You just need to work out what the difference is. 80 minus 65. Remember to double check everything. Doesn't matter how smart you are, everybody makes mistakes. 80 minus 65 is 15. The difference is 15. And that's your answer. So there's a lot of working out to do, but very, very easy calculations, especially with the calculator, and you just have to work out the difference. Right, so now we are up to the hardest questions that you can get, and the ones that a lot of people struggle with in terms of rearranging a formula. So we're going to try and break this down into different steps. Let's have a little look through the question first so you'll know how to spot this type of question. So first of all, it says that Bobby runs a small business. His products sell for £6 each and his variables costs are £4.50 per unit. It tells us the break-even formula, and it says if the break-even point is 5,000, what are the fixed costs? So if we put our formula in, you need to figure out which things that we need to work out. So we know that break-even is fixed costs divided by selling price minus variable cost. So what we need to do is we know these values. So let's say that we know the break-even point, we know the selling price, and we know the variable cost. We need to work out FC. We need to get FC on its own. Okay, so let's start by putting in the figures that we do have and go from there. So we know that the break-even point is 5,000. We know the fixed costs is the thing that we need to find out. And we know that our selling price is £6 and our variable cost is 4.5 or £4.50. Let's go through the process again. And we know that it's divided by £1.50. Okay, so now all we need to figure out is what fixed costs are. So we're going to use something called the order of operations. So I've got this table here. We've got our operations and we've got what the inverse would be. So we need to get FC to be on its own. We've got this division symbol on the right hand side, which means that fixed costs is going to be divided. So we need to take this 1.5 to the other side of the equal sign, which means the operation is division. On the inverse, on the other side, it's going to become multiplication. So it becomes 5,000 times 1.5. Okay, and when we do that, it will be equal to FC. Just putting the correct multiplication in. Equals FC. So now we've got fixed costs on its own. We just have to work that particular sum out, which we're always going to use a calculator for because we don't want to get it wrong. So 5,000 times 1.5 is 7,500. So 7,500 is the fixed costs, which is what it asks us for in the question. So whichever of these elements that you need to find out, you need to look at what the operation is, and when we move it to the other side, that's what's going to happen. You need to reverse or do the inverse when you move it to the opposite side. So this is just to boost your confidence a little bit, is the question that we've just worked out was actually a multiple choice question. So you had options to choose from. So if you were really stuck, everything that we just worked out before, all of this, is you could do a bit of trial and error. You could put in the possible answers from the multiple choice. You could put in the different options into the formula and see which one works out as 5,000. So that particular question would have actually been a lot easier than what you first thought. But I'm trying to prepare you for if it wasn't multiple choice.